Hey there, and welcome to another episode of Austin Tech Connect. This is the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. My name is Tom Singer, and I have been hosting the show, God, hard to believe, for 3 years. And we have interviewed about, 150 people about how they got involved in technology, what their companies are doing, and their thoughts about the Austin tech community and the future of our ecosystem. I'm really proud to say that a friend of mine told me just yesterday he was looking for an Austin Tech podcast, and he asked AI what was the best one, and this was the answer. There were a lot of answers, but he said the first one that came up was Austin Tech Connect. So I don't know. I haven't gone on to AI and done the experiment, but that is a one-person observational thing that AI thinks we have the best local podcast going. So truth, who knows? But a fun thing to say either way. Before we get started, I want to thank the sponsor of Austin Tech Connect, and that is Calavista Software. They are software without the drama. They help small companies all the way up to enterprise organizations in developing software without the drama. And we thank them for their support of the Austin Technology Council. I say this about so many companies that sponsor our events, our podcast, our newsletter, etc., is they're true community champions, because nonprofits like ATC and others, we can't do it if the local community doesn't step up and help us do the things we're trying to do to be the thread that runs through that community and unite Austin Tech. All right, so today we are joined by Ryan Hatcher. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So Ryan is the CEO and founder of Phoenix Semiconductor Corporation. And if you don't know Ryan, you should, because what he is doing is he is trying to really implement change in the supply chain industry, in the semiconductor industry. And we're going to talk a little bit about why that is necessary. He's lived in Austin for about 14 years. He's one of these people who really believes in getting involved and mentorship. He said he's always open to talking to young entrepreneurs who are trying to start a company, because, God, it's so hard if you don't know what you're doing or it's your first time to really figure it out. And sometimes these entrepreneurs think that there's roadblocks. They have to join something and pay money to get assigned an entrepreneur. And he agrees that the serendipity of just having a cup of coffee sometimes can really be helpful. So he likes to do that. And he also is an outdoors guy. He likes to go out and do those outdoorsy things that we know about. He's a little bit into martial arts, but mainly it's all about raising his 3 kids and growing this business, which is so true with so many entrepreneurs that we have. It's their company and their family and their community, and that's who Ryan is. And also, he's a new member at the Austin Technology Council, and we appreciate his support. So Ryan, let's jump into this. You grew up, you said you were kind of a farm kid. You grew up in that. How did you get involved in technology? What led you into the game of tech?
Yeah, great question. So I guess it really started as I went into school. When I was going to college, I was wanting to be a doctor, like a physician. My uncle is a physician. He's like a family doctor in a little farm town called Yorkville, Illinois, that probably no one's ever heard of. But I just always loved that business, and we were very close growing up. And literally, as I was like driving to school, I was being driven down to my freshman year, like deciding what major to be. Thumbing through the printout of all the descriptions of all the different majors. I was going to do like a biology major or a chemistry major, the typical pre-med major. And then I got to physics, and in physics it said, physics majors have the highest acceptance rate in medical school.
Wow. And
I just closed the book, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll just be a physics major. So it really was like, you think about the serendipity of it, like it really was that kind of a silly of a decision-making process, but it really crafted the rest of my life. So as an undergrad physics major, I was, again, focused on medical school for the first couple of years, and then just fell in love with physics. I had an extraordinary advisor, undergraduate research advisor, that just really inspired me. And he had a background in defense electronics and optical systems at the Navy Research Labs. And he just had these amazing stories of all these like crazy things they were doing, back in the 70s and 80s. And I just loved it. And I just pivoted. I remember telling my parents, I was like, I'm not going to medical school. Good news and bad news, by the way, because graduate school for physics is free. So that that was good news. I wasn't gonna have to saddle myself with debt. But yeah, that's really how I got into it. It was kind of just totally random, and then from there, I I spent 2 years after undergrad working for a software company that did like it was a software modeling company for like magnets and motors and stuff, and that was fun. And then I went back to grad school, and when I went to grad school, I got into a group that was doing a lot of work in they were doing a lot of work in radiation effects in silicon. And so that's how I got introduced into the sort of device physics world, and then specifically in semiconductors. So we were looking at basically how does electronics fail when they're in space, or when they're sitting next to a weapon, a nuclear weapon. So it was the DOE and the Air Force that largely paid for my graduate work. So very interesting work. My advisor was an old IBMer, and he was extremely connected into the the CMOS world, the silicon world, semiconductor world. And so I was exposed to it then, which then paid dividends later. So anyway, from there I went to Lockheed Martin out of graduate school, and I worked on advanced electronics for defense applications for about 5 or 6 years, really doing, I would say, very, DARPA-esque type work, if people are familiar with DARPA.
Sure.
So these are like really crazy, high risk, like almost certainly not going to work type of, big risk, big reward type research. So, and that was fun. Did that for about, I guess it was about 5 years. All the while I had been continuing to do some work in more, conventional silicon, CMOS, and based on some of that work, I got recruited, and that's how I ended up in Austin. Nice. So based on that work, I was recruited to work in an advanced, in a lab that was looking at sort of like second or 2 or 3 generations out in the transistor world, basically. So, came down and moved to Austin, Texas, to work for Samsung. It was great. Just really fell in love with the place. I mean, the role I was in was super interesting. It was an amazing team. Very blessed to be part of that group. But really, like, I had no idea. I'd never been to Austin before. I've been here for a conference once when I was like 23, and it was
probably a very different town that far back.
Oh, it was a very different town, and I was in a different part of my life. I was no kids, and I can remember going over in 6th Street. Spent a lot of time there with this crazy Swedish graduate student from UCSD. But anyway, good times there. But just really fell in love with the town and fell in love with the entrepreneurship of it. And just this crazy, just incredible town of this like crossroads of technology and big companies that do things like Samsung or Apple or NVIDIA and all Intel, of course, all these huge companies that were doing things, and then sprinkled in were these just amazing startups that were growing. So that's where I first, came across Capital Factory and that whole environment, and just fell in love with it.
Nice. So I want to go backwards, and then I want to touch on a couple of things throughout your career.
Yes, sir.
I want to go back to what you were saying about, being in the car, being driven to your undergrad, from Illinois, being driven out to Wake Forest, for undergrad, and just thumbing through and saying, oh, look, physics, more people get into medical school, and how that changes your life. I wonder if a lot of young people realize how many fleeting decisions, and not that choosing your major is a fleeting decision, but, planning to be biology and going, oh, physics sounds good, it might help me with the next step, takes you in an entirely different direction. My kids both went to high-end colleges, if you will, prestige schools. I went to kind of what was the bigger party school in America back in the 80s, and I chose it. I was accepted to 2 nice private schools in California, but my dad said, if you go to USC, you're going to be 20 minutes from home, and my mom was really ill, and he thought I'd be home all the time. And he goes, I don't know if that's a good idea. And he goes, but if you go to Santa Clara, you're going to be an 8-hour drive away, and I can't get you if I need you. And he goes, but if you went to San Diego State, which was the 3rd school I was accepted to, he's like, you'd be a 2-hour drive away, so you could come home on the weekends if I needed help. And that was how I made a decision that absolutely changed everything, that I did in my whole life. So when you said that, it triggered me. I wonder how many people are listening realize that just a minor thing that, this over that can really take you in a different direction. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. Of course. I mean, it's a chance conversation here. It's a chance, meeting of someone there. You mentioned it earlier, connecting with a mentor, someone who has a story that's relevant to you that says, hey, I see something in you and you should think about this. These are all these chance encounters that can shape a life for sure.
Well, and that leads me to another thing from your story is a couple times it sounded like you had the right mentor. You had the advisor when you were in your graduate school. You had a couple people who you worked with here and there who, kind of guided you in and introduced you to things you didn't even know that excited you. So let's touch on that. How important is it for people to be open to the serendipity of the people who cross their paths?
Yeah. It's everything. I mean, Tom, we're totally aligned on this. I've been following you for a long time, and the things you say, and I always resonate with it. I mean, this notion that you got lone geniuses who go out there and build things is total bullshit. It's really communities. I mean, there are lone geniuses for sure, and who are amazing. But when you talk about really building something substantial, when you talk about building a company or building a technology, building a solution, it's always a team that gets there. And when you talk about breaking into a new area or really treading new ground, the best thing you can possibly do is talk to other people who are pathfinders. It's to talk, it's the one advantage that humans have over every other creature in the world is we can learn in meaningful ways, very deep ways from other humans. So yeah, no, I totally agree. I think tapping into networks, but first off, investing in networks is massive. It's really the one, and if you have one bit of advice I always give, especially to younger people, is do not ignore that. It's you don't know. And the other element is especially in a town like this, or when you're at school, you're at San Diego State and you don't know. I mean, the people that you meet who are interesting, maybe seem like these just kids who are just, it's just another kid. You don't know where they're going. You don't know where they'll end up, coming back into your life later on.
Yeah. And I mean, that happened to me. I mean, the first person I met in college, my mom was really ill when I left for college. So my parents didn't drive me. My older brother drove me. And what I found out years later was mom and dad gave him a bunch of cash so he could go party with his friends. He was 10 years older than I am. So he was 28. He'd go party with his friends who lived in San Diego. He literally dropped me off and didn't tell me, but he had to get out as quick as he could because they were going to the Del Mar racetrack that day. So,
nice.
So we left early to get an early start, but as soon as I was settled, he's like, I think you should meet people. I've done this before. I'm going to leave. I found out a decade later that he was late to the racetrack, but
he was bet on the ponies.
That's right. But the first person I met 10 minutes after my brother left is, he and I started a business together. He's obviously one of my closest friends in the world. He's my daughter's godfather, and has had probably the most impact on my life of any non-family member. And, but he is family, really. I mean, our kids kind of grew up together, even though they were across the country. Again, that person you meet and, other people who were in my fraternity and things like that still to this day. I have fraternity brothers who I still have an active business as a professional speaker. Their company's having a conference and they'll be like, hey, I went to college with a guy who does that. And so I'll get referred by people who they've never seen me speak, but they're like, oh, I trust him. I know him. So, impacted my life every week somehow if somebody from college still touches me. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. And I think in a place, not only school, not only college, but also just in a place like Austin, when you're out and about and you're engaging and you see these people and they've got some crazy little idea or, maybe they're trying to raise a little money. And then the next thing you know, you see them in Austin, and they've closed a big round or they've done whatever they've done. But it really is, Austin is wonderful in the sense that there is just so much energy here. And yet it's still of a size where you can really develop a network that's pretty that where you can get to anyone in Austin probably through one person, through one contact. It's that size. So unlike a place like New York or, San Francisco.
And while it's not like it was 20 years ago, Austinites are still usually willing to help if they get that call from someone they trust. They'll take the call. It's a little,
Exactly.
People always say it's the best. It might be the best city in the country for that, but it's not as good as it was 20 years ago. We used to have a thing where sort of all of your exited rich CEOs would still show up at the high-tech happy hours and stuff like that. And now, we're a little more siloed in who hangs out with who, but I still think you're right. You can get that connection. And like I tell everybody is, if you come to the Austin Technology Council or you go to something at Capital Factory or you go to something with the Chamber of Commerce or whoever, and you're like, oh, I didn't meet the A team of Austin. They didn't show up. I remind people, look, real leaders are the ones who show up in the community. And so it doesn't matter who's in the room. There's somebody there who can have that impact. Don't come in keeping score of people's resumes.
Yep, totally.
So you also called it, Austin, sort of a crossroads of technology. And I thought that when you were saying that, I thought I had to go back to that because I think that is something – the press certainly doesn't give Austin that credit when they write these articles that are sort of negative about our tech community and stuff. But we do. We have the big companies, the Intels, the AMDs, the Samsungs, et cetera. And we have, these pure startups, people with an idea who are trying to change an industry. And we'll talk about yours in a second. But we have that. And then we have these, what I call sort of the mid-sized growth companies, the people who have 25, 50, 100 employees up to, 500 employees who are based here, who are getting funded and they're doing things and they're just not, people don't see it, but I think I tallied up, there's about 300 of those companies that are doing stuff that should be getting more attention. So why do you think that crossroads works here and maybe not in so many other places?
Yeah, I think there's just some, again, part of this there's always just an element of luck, an element of history that like where the stars kind of align here and they maybe didn't elsewhere. But I'll say from my vantage point, you've got this crazy, and by the way, you know this as well as anyone. You've got this just random bit of history where folks here, 40 years ago, brought in Semitech. Mm-hmm. Austin was not on the map of semiconductors before that. And all of a sudden these visionaries had understood that if we can get this homed here, it's going to serve as an anchor and as like almost like a gravitational well, for companies and talent and so on. There's always this tipping point of talent. And I've benefited from it tremendously. I've known it intellectually, and then since I started this company, I feel it, and I really I understand it in a more visceral way, which is when you have a certain just mass of talented people who are just in the ecosystem. They could be, it's fine. They've got jobs and kids and family, they're conducting their lives. But when you get a certain amount of that, it has its own, quantity has a quality all its own, as, Napoleon once said. So you end up with this fact that it just makes it easier to bring the people that you need into your orbit to get things done when the time comes. So you look at Austin. Why is it so powerful? It's because you've got this base of, in my industry, in the semiconductor world, you've got this base from the Semitech days that then served as this attractor that brought in all the companies, and then you got like all the supporting industries then were attracted to that. So that's why you got all your Synopsys and Cadence. They all have offices here, and support all the tool vendors, AMAT and ASML. Everyone has a Lam. Everyone has a presence here to support that. So it's like this snowball effect of talent. And then on top of it, we're just at a time, and again, this is the stars aligning, but everyone knows it. It's hard to do business in California. Mm-hmm. There's a tremendous amount of talent and capital in California. What they don't have is an environment that's friendly to business. It's hostile. I don't know why they did that, but they did, and it's accruing to the benefit of places like Texas.
Yeah,
Austin
absolutely.
has this wonderful culture, and again, it's like this cowboy culture almost, but it's like it just happens to be well suited to starting companies. People take risks here.
Well, in Texas, always. I mean, you go back to the Wildcatter days over 100 years ago, and Howard Hughes. I mean,
Exactly.
those were the tech entrepreneurs of their day, and obviously a different type of industry. But those Wildcatters, they took the risk, they did stuff, and they drilled holes. And
Absolutely,
it was great, and that was part of the Texas mystique. And one of the things I did when I took this job is I realized a lot of people don't know what you just said. They don't know the history. They don't know about the importance of Semitech and MCC coming to town. They don't know about that, and so I created a talk that I do for organizations who want it called "The History of Austin Tech," and it can be 15 minutes to an hour long. And it goes into, this. I can legitly trace back the growth of our tech industry to June of 1966. Now, my joke that I make is coincidentally that happens to be when I was born. I was born in California. I had nothing to do with it. But it's when the University of Texas hired Dr. George Kosmetsky. It was the summer of 1966. And at the time, other universities, and I forget them all, but I think Berkeley, I know Carnegie Mellon, others wanted him to come back he had been a professor at Carnegie Mellon before he'd started a company, and revise their business school. And instead he picked Austin. And he famously told the business leaders and the civic leaders and the government leaders, if we don't build a stronger business community, where will our grandchildren work? And the idea was, we like it here. We want to stay here. We need to lay a foundation so the entrepreneurs and the business people of tomorrow have opportunities. And there were probably 70 people over the course of that time who really contributed to laying that foundation. And that's why Austin Technology Council started the Austin Tech Hall of Fame 2 years ago. And you can't drop 70 names in one day, or that would be dumb. So we do 8 foundational inductees every year, and then a current inductee, and then a first-time founder award. And starting now, we're the first week of February when we're recording this, I'm about to, probably by the time this drops, I will be launching the nominations for the next 8 inductees, or 10 inductees, I guess, into the Hall of Fame, because it's it's an important thing that we know that history.
Absolutely. I went to that event last year. I think it was the inaugural one.
Last year was the second one. Yeah.
Or was the second one? Yeah. But yeah, no, it was a terrific event.
Yeah. So let's switch gears here and let's talk about Phoenix Semiconductor. So how long ago did you found it, and what caused you to do this? And what do you mean when you say you're trying to, change the leading edge there of how the supply chain in semiconductors operate?
Yeah, so I started the company along with my co-founder in 2023. So I guess about 2.5 years ago. One little additional bit of information or the story here. After Samsung, I went back to Lockheed, but this time I really was a big pivot in my career. I had been essentially an engineer, a device physicist, the whole time. And then when I went back to Lockheed, I was a technology scout in the CTO's office. So Lockheed, huge company. People mostly know about it because they make, fighter planes, F-35 and, F-16s and so on. But they've got, it's a massive company. They've got about 2,000 programs, and they build all kinds of systems. So I was a technology scout looking at companies, a lot of startups that were developing technology that was needed all across Lockheed. And so I was almost like a business development type role for small companies wanting to do business with Lockheed. I was like a mediator, and it was great. It was so fun. And I was here. It was just awesome. And because of my background at Samsung in advanced electronics, I was also doing troubleshooting, Tiger Team type work across the company for programs that were going red due to electronics issues. So I got this crazy seat I'm in the corporate overlooking this 120,000 person organization that's building everything from submarines to deep space, deep space spacecraft. And what I kept seeing was no one really cared about, I shouldn't say this. There was a lot less attention being paid, or a lot less, um, trouble being caused by the lack of advanced technology than the inability to source semiconductors that went end of life. And then the other element here was when I went back to Lockheed, it was about 6 months before COVID kicked off. So everyone got exposed to the problem that I'm about to describe in this little like year to 2 year window during COVID. So if you'll recall, COVID kicks off, all of these supply chain shortages started happening. And it was just super annoying. You couldn't get an F-150 and you couldn't get a microwave oven. It was like totally unrelated. But for the folks who were in the industry, the most interesting part about it was a lot of the chips that were not available, a lot of the supply chain shocks were not at the leading edge. In fact, I remember talking to my former colleagues at Samsung and being like, how are your orders? Because we were all looking at the leading edge, nodes, and they're like, that's fine. There's no problems with that. It's the trailing edge nodes. It's the nodes that build the little chips that are needed, but they're like, it's not the big CPU in the middle, or it's not the big GPU or the big NVIDIA chip. Those were available. It was a little memory or a little controller, a little something that should cost like, $5, and they can't get it anymore. And it was just wreaking havoc across, well, in that case, commercial enterprises, but the defense industry was just getting just crushed. So that was what I was exposed to, and I had no good answer for it. And I remember being like, but don't you guys care about quantum computing and nano bridge FETs? And they were like, we don't care about any of that. We just want to, we just want to be able to make our quarter. We just want to be able to continue our production, get the chips that we need so they can go in our systems, and then we can ship to our customers. That was it, Tom. I just got really embarrassed time and time again because I had no good answer. What do you do? You can't, there's a chip you need. It's $5 or it was $5, and now I can't get it. What do you do? What do you do, smart guy from corporate with your fancy suit? And I had nothing. I was like an empty bag. It was really embarrassing. So I did that for about 2 years, and about halfway through it, I was actually talking to another friend, another Austin guy. He great friend of mine who happened to be at Boeing at the time, and we were trading war stories about this issue. And in the middle of this conversation, he's talking about some big program that Boeing was about to lose to the French. And all of a sudden it hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, oh, and he was going to lose it because they couldn't source this one chip. It was one chip, and from the 80s. And I was like, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, Greer, I'm like, don't do it. I'm like, don't do it. I'm like, don't fab the silicon. Don't respin it. I know how to solve this problem. And ever since then, I was like, this needs to happen. There's so much demand for these chips that are no longer in production, but still needed, by the most important systems that keep us safe. And I from that moment on, I was like, I know how to solve this problem. As a tech scout for Lockheed, I tried to convince. So I was talking to companies all the time. I was talking to, on any given week, I was talking to 10, 20 companies. And for the folks that were good, the ones that were very competent in electronics, I was like, hey, here's what you should do. and no one took me up on it. Founders are stubborn, but I kept the idea, and then I ended up leaving Lockheed. Did a short stint at a British defense contractor, a CTO here in town, and then I left there. They got bought by private equity. I left, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna build it.
All right. So give us the elevator pitch about Phoenix Semiconductor. What is it that you guys do, and why is it important?
Yeah. So I think I just, start with a need. That's really how the company started. It really was this vast problem. I was aware of it in the defense world, being at Lockheed and so on. But, come to find out, really it's any industry that has sort of expensive equipment that lives a long time in production. So, just think about like medical technology, like the big MRI scanners, that live for a long time in production, or commercial aerospace, of course, similar to defense, heavy industry, oil and gas, electrical distribution. All these companies, all these industries have the exact same challenge, which is their products live way longer than the semiconductors that go in them. So that's really the need. That's what we're targeting. The way we're solving it is we're really building a drop-in replacement. So we're building chips that are effectively indistinguishable from the original. I always use this analogy when I'm talking to folks. I said, when we build a chip, if you had, a fish bowl, a giant popcorn bowl, and you just put the original chips and our chips in it, and then blindfold yourself and reached in and like just grabbed one, you won't care. It operates in a way that's indistinguishable from the original. And our mission is to build a catalog of thousands of SKUs that are needed all across these industries to keep them going. So that's really our focus. That's what we do. We've got 74 SKUs in our catalog right now. Yep.
How many people in the company?
We have 13 full-time employees and another, call it half a dozen, maybe up to 8 or 9 contractors that we can kind of spin up and spin down. We are hiring and expanding. So yeah, it's been quite a ride.
Nice. Well, it sounds like the growth potential is huge over the next 5 years.
Oh yeah, it's massive. I mean, we're right now, having proven that we can do it. We're now in that sort of early growth phase where we're just locking down, more customers and doing more we built. We're looking to essentially triple our output this year from last year.
Wow.
So
that's awesome. And again, it just goes back to what I say all the time and why I do this show where I interview people. People may have never heard of you or what you're doing, but you have this great idea that's doing well, that's about to scale and continue to scale. And nobody thinks that Austin, like I said, you get these articles written out of California or New York that basically say there's no good ideas coming out of Austin. And every day I talk to people who have great ideas, who are doing fascinating things in the technology world right here in Austin. So as we sort of wrap it up, any final thoughts, any final words for the people who are listening? Any thoughts about entrepreneurship or Austin that you want to share?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the main thing is to get out there. So much of the one thing about being an entrepreneur, and like as I had mentioned, I'd worked for big companies my entire career up until now. And the one thing I will say for those who are aspiring to it is to just know when you get into it, there's no momentum. So when you're at a company like a Samsung or a Lockheed, it's this behemoth that's just moving. It's just going, and there's all of the infrastructure is there. So you've got IT people, and you've got, all of the engineering and finance and contracts, and all of that is there. And when you start a company, there's nothing. It's just you. And so, all I would say is just, what you want to do is, no one can be an expert at all of it. So what you want to do is, first off, go into it wide, open, eyes wide open, and just know that you're going to have to build everything from scratch. But the good news is, when you're in a place like Austin, there's a big network of folks who have also done it. So reach out, find a mentor, find someone who's either, done what you've done in the same area, or even a parallel area. It doesn't have to be the same one, but they know what it takes to get an email server up, get all of the little things that you need. People have made all the mistakes before you. So I would just highly encourage people to go out, engage, and, get that feedback.
Nice. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for being a guest here on Austin Tech Connect and for your continued support of the technology community as a whole here in Austin. We look forward to seeing you at more ATC events and around town.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who tuned in and listened. You know what? The show's growing. We've had a little growth spurt in the show, and that all comes from word of mouth. So if you like this episode, make sure that you tell a friend, tell your coworkers, tell somebody else in the Austin tech ecosystem to check it out, and tell them just to ask AI what are the tech podcasts they should listen to. And who knows what you're going to get. But my one friend said that it suggested me. So, all right. Awesome. Thanks. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next week right here on Austin Tech Connect.